prior to this, I had a meeting with one of the political parties in Stormont about this very legislation and the importance of it. So it's being promoted politically. So let's begin in terms of our first speaker. And our first speaker is it's Jeannie McCann, isn't it, Jeannie? It's not Jenny, it's Jeannie McCann from the Strategic Investment Board.
Yes,
and
that's right.
Thanks, Jeannie. And Jeannie's going to look at an introduction to social value, specifically focusing on measures to increase the employment of people with disabilities. So I'm handing over to you, Jeannie, and off you go.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. Delighted to be with you all today. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak in this webinar, and a huge thank you to everyone who's helped to organise it. As Paul said, my name is Jeannie McCann. I'm a social value advisor at SIB, and I primarily advise on social value for services contracts. I'm going to speak to you about the recently introduced social value policy and how it relates to people who are disabled, and also share a few tips for suppliers and third sector organisations as well. So first of all, what is social value and public procurement? Just the next slide, please. So essentially, social value helps to create change by maximising the benefit of government spending power for people, communities and the planet. So it's not only about the delivery of a service or an end product, but it's looking for opportunities to add social value in the way that a contract is delivered. So it rewards companies who are innovative and forward-thinking. Social value has been included in public sector contracts in Northern Ireland since around 2015, first as performance clauses, and then the bisocial approach was introduced. And as an example of the impact that's happened in that time, almost 2,500 people who were long-term unemployed or had little work experience have accessed a job opportunity through social value initiatives. The next slide, please. And so from the 1st of June last year, there's been a significant step change for social value on public contracts. The Northern Ireland Executive introduced a new policy note, and it's now mandatory for public bodies to allocate a minimum of 10% of the total award criteria on services and construction contracts where the public contract regulations apply. So this means social value is now at the heart of public procurement in Northern Ireland. And there's a commitment to review the policy with a view of increasing this to 20% in June this year, but any decision on that will require executive approval. So this policy provides a framework of themes and indicators which are linked to the draft programme for government outcomes, and it enables a shared understanding of social value requirements and how they will be scored. So there are 4 themes, as you can see on the screen: increasing secure employment and skills, building ethical and resilient supply chains, delivering zero carbon, and promoting well-being. And so contracting authorities will select themes and indicators for contracts in order to reflect the subject matter of the contract and the authority's priorities. And so the next slide. So the policy outlines a number of indicators for each theme. And on the slide, you can see the indicators which relate to people who are disabled. Of course, that doesn't mean that disabled people can't benefit from other indicators. In fact, they do, but these are the ones that specifically relate to them. And so the first one is increasing the representation of disabled people in the contract workforce. So the social value initiatives are the delivery of paid employment or work placements for people who have a disability and are seeking employment. And each individual must be supported to obtain training and accreditation that is relevant to the tasks that they're expected to perform. A lawful outreach plan for positive action can also be delivered for the contract, which aims to increase applications for employment and training positions from people who have a disability and are seeking employment. And so we're going to hear much more about this indicator later in this session whenever we hear from the other speakers and find out how it can be practically applied. So the second indicator is support for disabled people to develop new skills and recognise qualifications. So this is the delivery of a skills development and educational attainment support in areas related to the contract to a school or organisation within the VCSE sector that aims to aid the career development of people who have a disability. For example, vocational talks, curriculum support, careers guidance, workplace visits, those sorts of things. And then the third one is to create a diverse supply chain to deliver the contract. So this could be the inclusion in the supply chain of a social enterprise of an organisation that supports disabled people, for example. And so the next slide. And so we will hear shortly some examples of the paid employment opportunities that will really bring these indicators to life. But in the meantime, here's an example of a work placement. So DERA had a contract for data analytics and business intelligence. Deloitte were the contractor, and they worked with the Now Group to deliver 4 work placements. And as many people will know, the Now Group is a social enterprise which supports people with learning difficulties and autism into jobs with a future. Each participant was assigned a buddy from the Deloitte team and shadowed both DERA and Deloitte employees. Participants received technical training and also developed soft skills, for example, in giving presentations. And they took part in mock interviews held by Deloitte and DERA as well. And one of the participants said, "I've learned a massive amount in a really short space of time. The placement has given me some new career options to think about data analytics." And then just move on to the next slide. Is there one before that? Okay, great. So just if you are a bidder working on a tender, you will have to submit a social value methodology as part of your response. And a scoring matrix is included in the contract's invitation to tender documents. So you can see on screen there a few tips, general tips to help with any application. So the first one is to understand what is required. I can't stress it enough. It's really important to read and reread the tender documents very carefully. Secondly, it's about being specific and relevant. So very clearly outline what you're going to do, how you're going to do it in any organisation that you're going to work with in the process. So outline your stakeholders and how you will engage them. And then thirdly, additionality. So social value is not about business as usual and it's not about CSR policies. It's forward thinking and forward looking. So depending on the size of the contract, maybe it's the opportunity to provide employment opportunities for people who are disabled for the first time, or maybe you already have an existing employment scheme like this, and this is an opportunity to offer roles that you wouldn't have had the chance to otherwise. And so the next slide. And so the third sector organisations play a really vital role in delivering social value. Social enterprises can bid for public contracts as suppliers, but there's also the opportunity for VCSEs to be brokers. So brokers are third sector organisations who are based in Northern Ireland and who already work with people and communities on the social value themes. So the Now Group is an example of that in what I just shared from the example I shared. There's an interactive database on our website, you can see it there on screen, to help connect suppliers and brokers so that they can work together to deliver social value requirements. And there's a registration form on our website for any organisation that would like to be added to the database. And then just the next slide. And so I just wanted to end by highlighting that there's lots of resources on our website for suppliers, brokers, and the public sector as well. You can sign up to your regular e-news in which you'll get notified of upcoming trainings too that you can sign up to. And this has just obviously been a very high level overview. If you are working on a bid and you want a bit more general guidance, then you can sign up to your supplier information session, which is happening at the end of the month, and you can drop us an email to register for that. And so just to close then, whether you're in the public, private or third sector, I urge you to see social value in public contracts as an opportunity to leave a really positive legacy for people and communities long after the contract has ended. Thank you.
Jeannie, thank you very, very much. That was really informative. And I have to say, you know, in our organization, we see social value legislation as a real game changer in terms of the equality agenda, and more broadly. But it's a huge issue, and it's not. You know, it's interesting that if you look at other countries where equality has been very successful, positive action in particular, like America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, it's happened. One of the instigators has been social value legislation. If you look at America, for example, Canada, introduction of social value legislation, in their case in the past, had huge positive implications in terms of equality. And that's why for us it's so important. And listen, that was a very, very informative discussion. And thanks for giving us the link, because I think I'll be going to that myself, you know. And I would say, you know, brilliant. There are brokers there. It's fabulous. Interactive database. I mean, it's all set up. It's just so easy to do, isn't it? And I would say to employers, some employers are approaching us, with quite a number, who want to develop a positive action strategy. And we're delighted to do that. So if you're an employer and you want to develop a positive action strategy and look at social value legislation with Jeannie, well, we're happy to give you more advice. So thanks, Jeannie, and we'll be coming back to you with some questions, but that was very, very interesting. Thank you. Okay, we're going to come to our second talk, and our second is Martin Christian and it's his colleague Jude, from basically version 1 and Cedar Foundation. We discovered earlier that Martin is a West Ham supporter, but there you go, you know. We'll not hold that against you, Martin, okay? So Martin and Jude are going to have a discussion around Martin's experience of pre-employment training. So over to you, and go ahead, please.
So I'm Jude McVitie, Social Value Manager of version 1, and Martin is here on placement with us at the minute. So we're doing it from the Belfast office, which is why we're together today. So our first question for you, Martin, is how was it you originally got involved with Cedar?
Right, okay. Well, I got involved with Cedar as part of the rehabilitation exercise that was offered to me as part of getting back to work. I had suffered an injury, and as part of that, there I was offered the Cedar Foundation services to get back into work. So with that, there I had taken a look, reviewed Cedar, reviewed what was on offer, and well, the health worker, support worker that I had was called Mark Erskine, who was very, very helpful, and he's been with me right throughout the program. And Mark has been absolutely brilliant and helping me sort of get back on the usual working and the pattern of being independent and getting used to being independent again, whereas I was heavily reliant on kind of mum and dad to do things like that, whereas this time I was starting to do a little bit more freedom, a little more independence. Yeah.
And then how did you then get involved in the employability program that we were offering at version 1?
Well, the options were there. Version 1, the name came up as someone who offered a way to get back into work. Whenever I took a look at version 1, who they were, what they represented, and you know the list of clients they had, and the work that they also have as well. There's a full background check on my side that did, but it was all positive from what I've seen, and
we passed.
Yeah, no, 100% flying colours. Yeah, no, I couldn't. Honest, when I seen that this year was an avenue for me getting back into software development or getting back into IT just in general. Then I seen this year was a good idea, or a good pathway to get back in.
Awesome. And then I know that Cedar were just vital for this program. They offered so much support to everybody involved. But would you mind telling us a little bit about the support you personally got from Cedar to take part in that employability skills program?
Yeah, Mark and Cedar offered me the chance to be involved in programs, group programs with other people who've are in a similar situation. They so we kept the groups close, set down to 5. I couldn't really work with anything higher than that. So we kept it the sort of the interactive side of things, limited to the numbers, just a number of people. So that was good for me.
So lots of like talking through what your needs would be and planning and just pulling that information together so that people like me could effectively facilitate it. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, it is. That's more or less what happened.
I have to mention the taxis. They get taxis for everyone, and it is so important. It really is.
That's great.
The transport and everything. Like, okay. From us, what sort of support were you getting from us that made it easier for you to be in the program?
Well, the office that I've got here today, getting support from the company that the services you have involved and the facilities you have here as well has been massive for me. So getting back into the general work environment for me has been absolutely massive, but also getting to meet people as well. So the social side of that things. Of that aspects were big for me, and it's still good for me to get back into the pattern, like I said, the pattern of the way I'm working and getting used to that again.
Yeah.
So really just integrating myself again into the way I used to work, and also getting used to the facilities that are now on offer. That's for me has been massive. And also my support worker, Mark, again, he's helped me with any of the problems I've been running into. So I've had issues with fatigue and sort of fatigue management and things like that, but also if I'm having trouble reading, for example, so if I'm having trouble consuming information, Mark's had big helps on give me big help with how do I go about that, what are the strategies for planning for when you're trying to absorb information and note information and effectively remember it. Mark has helped me with that. So again, that's been a massive boost for me.
And overall, has this been a positive experience?
Oh, it has, yeah, it has. No, it's that the one thing I was worried about was getting back into work, whether the capabilities were still there, and things like that there. So, that was one of my big fear, was also getting back out of the real world, essentially, and getting I'm going to have the confidence to get back out and get working with people from same sort of software background, same sort of IT background as me. So that was one of the areas, and so steadily over time, my confidence has gone up with on behalf of this program with Cedar and with version 1, and that's still increasing today. So I'm seeing the benefits of all the work everyone's put in.
And would you agree that this sort of thing is worth doing for other employers then, that other employers should be thinking about replicating this kind of program and getting people in?
100%, yeah, absolutely. Without question.
Thank you very much. That's us.
Jude and Martin, thank you very much for that. And I would say we'll be joined by Michael from Cedar later on in the questions and answer session, but that was really interesting. It always makes, for us, very often we come at things from quite a theoretical point of view. We explain the law on this and that, and it's really important for employers to get a sense of the practical things, I think, isn't it? And how an employer and what an employer has done in this case to work with Martin, and what are the experiences in that. So thank you very much for that. I have 2 questions to put to Martin. And the first one is, Martin, you come to the skills program with a lot of experience, professional experience. What was it like working in a group of people with such different types and levels of digital skills?
Oh, it was good for me because a lot of it was refreshing as well.
Right.
So with the aspects of the group, and being an example, the group project we were on, there were 4 of us working on that, and each of us between us, we have different levels of experience. With me being having the most experience, but I also gained a lot of insight into the other members who I was working with and what way they worked, and there was a lot of people who, there was members in my group who had very little technical experience, but they were brilliant at the communication side of things. So that is one area that I found very advantageous. And again, it was just the people that I was involved with, the work that we were doing as part of the task we were being assigned. Again, that was something else that was good for me, and it's still something I'm building on today, but it's something I've learned a lot over the last couple of months.
Right. And one thing I was particularly interested in when my colleague Una told me about this app that you're working on, which I'm not a very technical person, I have to admit, Martin, but I found the app very, very interesting. Can you tell us a wee bit about the app that you're working on?
Right. Well, the idea was that I was going to have, whenever I was in the rehabilitation, whenever I was in getting involved in the rehabilitation side of things, I was involved with sort of, there was 3 areas that was important for me, and they were the PT rehabilitation project tracker. So for me, there was areas of like the physics, the what, sorry?
Physio.
I'm trying to remember what the RPT.
Oh, don't worry.
We've lost an abbreviation, but we'll.
Yeah.
Oh, look, that
Yeah.
happens all the time. Don't worry
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, it was to do with the 3 areas that I was working with when I was getting when I was involved in rehabilitation. One was the sort of looking after myself, so occupational therapy, and the other one was the physiotherapy, and the other one was actually coming.
Was it just life and organization?
Yeah.
Like literally, you've got an appointment, but it's not your medical appointment, or you've got to do this next piece of work. Yeah, it's just keeping.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Order.
Again, I was just getting these down on paper and revising them and getting used to them, but also putting them into, from a practical perspective, putting them into force. So getting used to going and getting the bus, or getting used to going down to the shop and do your shopping, and counting the change you have and how much money you should be getting back, and just being confident that you were able to do it. And that has built up over time, but again, that was something that was involved in the program with me, and that's what was offered to me, and that was something I found invaluable.
I think it's really cool because it's going to have so many different potential applications. I mean, people who are experiencing dementia, honestly, people like myself who are just a wee bit disorganized may find benefit from this application. So I think it's very, very interesting because it is user-led, and more tech should be designed by people who are able, who need to use it because they have that sort of insight. So I think I'm really excited. I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, no, it's a shortcut to get things done. So that you don't have to have the technical ability to get your kind of routines working. And this year is going to kind of speed up that your daily environment and sort of kind of just make life easier for you.
No, it's interesting, Martin, because it reminds me a friend of mine outside of work is developing sort of an app. And it's funny in these days when everybody is stressed and busy, and this app is going to remind people to meditate, to stop during the day, during our busy day, and say, okay, I'm going to slow things down. I'm going to do some meditation and so forth. And it's almost like, when you look on Apple, for example, there are life planning apps, where you say to yourself, well, I'm going to do this then, and then I'm going to do this, because we all like structure, I think, don't we? We all like to know that when we're going to do things, and then to be able to say, well, I've done those things now. So the best of luck with the app. It sounds really interesting. So thank you very much, Jude and Martin, for that. And there are questions, but I'm not going to ask them now. I'll wait till the end. And again, someone has said, thanks for sharing your personal journey, Martin. And I can only say, from my knowledge of working in this area, there is nothing more powerful than people sharing their personal story. There is nothing. And I will be saying to Jude and Martin and colleagues, we need to try and, if Martin is agreeable, to get that message out through using this video, because it is hugely powerful for employers, because employers very often will look at this sort of training and say, well, I couldn't do that, or I can't do that. But when you get sort of an example like the one from Martin and Jude, that will change employers' minds. It's so powerful. So please, thank you very much for that input, and I'll come back to you later on. So again, lots of really good stuff here, and people are asking questions. And I would say to you, before we do the questions and answer session, no question is a silly question. Sometimes people get worried about that. It's not. Ask the question, because we find the same questions asked again and again, and it's so important. Don't leave today with something in your mind thinking, well, I'm not sure about that. And if you have any questions to Jude or Martin about their experience, please ask as well. So we're going to move on to the questions and answer session, and basically we have a number of guests, and I'm going to put some questions to them. They will undoubtedly result in you thinking, oh, I'd like to ask this or that. So again, use the chat function, put the questions in, and I'm going to go through our guests and just ask some of the questions. Now, some of these guests haven't spoken before, so I'm going to briefly introduce them, and then I'll put the question. And if you have an answer, or sorry, if you have a question resulting from that, please put it into the chat function, and we'd be delighted to address it. So our first guest is Ashley Robb from the recruitment company. And Ashley, you're there with us, yes?
I am indeed, yes. Hello.
Hello, Ashley. Can you explain the public procurement contract that you are delivering and which social value theme you are targeting? And things like what targets you're hoping to meet, and if you have an example would be brilliant. So a lot of questions in one, Ashley, but hopefully you're able to kind of digest them.
No problem, Paul. I'll certainly do my best. Yeah, so just to introduce myself a little bit, I'm Ashley Robb, just as Paul had said. I'm the contracts manager for the civil service contract, which is what I'll be talking about today. I work for the Recruitment Co, previously known as Premier People. I think most people would probably still know us as Premier People. I've been involved in the social value previously known as the Bi-Social Clause, since around 2017 in one shape or form. Currently, within the framework that we have with the civil service, our social value clauses are that we have to have hit a certain percentage of the staff that we place. So we have two groups. One is targeted recruitment and training groups, and we have to have 11.25% of people placed to hit that target. And within that targeted recruitment and training group, that relates to people who have left education, people who are unemployed, who have been unemployed for a certain period of time. There is people who have been unemployed due to a direct result of COVID-19, people who are a member of the client's priority groups as well. So then you've got your client's priority groups, and that's 3.75% is our target there. And that would be candidates who have a disability, who are looked after child or care leaver, and or a person who is from the BAM community. So there's those three sections within the priority groups. Obviously, for the purposes of today, I'll talk about the disability aspect of that. So we look at each of those differently as to how we're going to, I suppose, attract candidates and support them candidates. I think in my experience, the biggest tool that we have had has been to connect as much as possible with support groups and support workers. We've connected quite a lot over the years with different organisations and the supported employment officers from them. Some that we have connected with has been Disability Action. We've connected with Action on Hearing Loss. We've worked with them quite a bit. The Cedar Foundation, Action Mental Health. We find that when you're working with a supported employment officer, that you have a really much better chance of finding success within that placement. And that's for a few reasons. You know, the supported employment officers, they generally will already have a relationship with that candidate. They'll understand what that individual needs, because no two people, as we all know, are the same. So they'll be able to really come to you with from an individual perspective to help you support that person into employment, to help you look at reasonable adjustments, to help you connect as well with different organisations that are there to support you. You have lots of tools and resources available. Department for Communities, for example, they'll support you with the Workable programme and also with Access to Work. So they're there to help you out as well. But again, you know, as I say, going back to the supported employment officers, I feel like that has always been a real key to our success. We have found that our clients are very welcoming of discussions with the supported employment officers as well. And the more engagement that you have in those early, really just from day dot, you know, as to what is needed for that individual to support them, to ensure that they're going to have a really positive experience going through their application process, right into induction, and then obviously regular check-ins to make sure everything is going well whilst they're working. Obviously, I'm coming at this from a recruitment agency perspective, so it may be slightly different. I appreciate that for different organisations and depending on how you're looking at that. But from our point of view, it has very much been the more engagement you have from the very start, the more understanding you have of that particular candidate, what they need and what's going to support them, and then bringing in, you know, as I say, where possible, the supported employment officers, and in our case, it's the client that we would have as well, you know, the departments within the civil service, for example, making sure that everybody has a really good, clear understanding of what's needed to make sure that that person, as I say, is going to have a real positive experience going through that. We've had lots of really good positive outcomes as well over the years, and a lot of people have gone on to secure permanent employment as a result of the confidence that a good positive placement has given them. There's, you know, we've had people who have gone on to further education afterwards. Just it's been a really good positive experience for us as an agency, regardless of even the targets that we have to make. You know, it's been a really good thing for us. Yeah, that's, I think, what I needed to say. Sorry if I've rambled a little bit.
Paul, you're on mute, sorry.
Sorry, see, I've done it. You know, I would say, I know, I can't believe I've done that, you know, but what I was saying, actually, you weren't rambling at all. What I was saying is we all think we ramble a bit when we're talking about what we do every day. You know, we go on and we say, oh, that's rambling. It's not, because that is all new to a lot of us. Now, yeah. It's not a lot. Some of it's new to me. Most of it I did know, but some of that is new to me, you know. But for a lot of people out there, it's entirely new. So don't worry, you're not rambling.
Thank you.
And if anything, I'll tell you what most people tend to say is they'd like to hear more, because it's all very practical stuff, you know. Yeah. But I thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Again, it was very interesting and very practical. And thanks very much for taking the time, Ashley. And we'll see if we have questions in the chat function, so we'll see if we can come to those. Yeah. Thanks again. So we're going to come to our next person, who's Helen Whiteside. Sorry, not. Oh, yes, it is Helen. Helen from Recruitment Co. So are you with us there, Helen?
Yes, I am indeed.
Thanks, Helen. So what advice would you provide to other contractors in terms of how they can achieve their social value targets?
Okay, well, I'm probably going to touch on some of what Ashley has already said, but
okay.
I'm sure Ashley would agree the most rewarding part of our role, I think, is getting people, matching people into the right role. And this is especially challenging if they have been facing, barriers to work. So we've made this work by establishing great, relationships with different organisations. And I have to say, Judith has been instrumental in facilitating that. Or sorry, Edith. Sorry, Edith. Has been really instrumental in facilitating that with us. So we've done site visits, presentations, sort of other engagement exercises. But I think once these introductions have been made, the most important thing, as Ashley said, is reaching out to the supported employment officers. They're very skilled and they're the vital link that we have with the candidates. They'll provide you with all the relevant information. They'll help facilitate, the programme, and hopefully at the end of it, as Ashley says, we'll have a very successful placement for that particular person. So we don't just see it as a tick box exercise, if you like, we see it as something very meaningful and something that enhances our skills as recruiters. So hopefully employers will feel that it enhances their manager's skills as well. There is a little bit of a fear factor, but you're not your own, and there's a lot of sort of support and guidance out there as well. I feel, it enriches your whole organisation, and it possibly even encourages other parts of your organisation to come forward who maybe haven't disclosed certain things about their sort of situation. So I would, strongly encourage every organisation to take the first step. And as I say, it's been very rewarding for us, especially in recruitment. You don't often get things that give you as much pleasure as, someone who's been out of work for a long time and are happy to go into a placement that's going to suit them and that they're going to thrive in. Sorry, I probably rambled on a bit too.
No, you haven't, because one of the things, Helen, that you said I thought was really very useful was it's not a tick box exercise.
No,
and you have to recognize people. And sorry, you said it, and I agree. You recognize people's fears, because we're all human beings, and every time we face something new or new people, we all have fears. Because we're kind of stepping out, aren't we?
We were fearful to do this presentation.
Yeah.
It is a little bit out of our comfort zone as well, even though we talk to people all day, every day. We're fearful doing that, and that's where, it is very rewarding for us, and it is something that we don't just see as part of the contract. We see it as something that, gives us some job satisfaction as well.
And what I think when you were saying there, to me, you're talking about trying to change a culture or to create a culture, aren't you, really?
Yeah.
Where, you change, or you have those positive views. The people who come in, you want them to feel welcome. And I mean, critically, as you mentioned, Helen, you're trying to change other parts of an organisation to persuade them, aren't you?
Yeah, well, we would have, I've been in recruitment for 23 years. And, it is something that we've just really been doing over the last sort of 7 years. And, we're educating everyone in our office as well as how to do, how to do this and how it will work for them. And we have found that some of our best placements have been people that have come through the bisocial clause, that they've ended up being the best candidates by far. And as Ashley said, a lot of them have gone on to secure permanent jobs.
Yeah, I think that's the critical point, and we might come back to it later. If you're an employer doing this, you've got to try and create a culture where people feel they want to be engaged and involved, and it's all about that, isn't it, as a human being? So no, Helen, very interesting, and thanks very much for that. And
no problem.
We appreciate that. We're going to come on to our third question, which is going back to Jude McVitie from version 1. Jude, can you explain the public procurement contract that you're delivering and what social value themes you're addressing?
Sure. So the original employability program we delivered with CEDAR over 2022 was a piece of work we were delivering for the Department of Finance, ESS provision of IT services and solutions. But it's worth mentioning that the Department for Communities were quite a significant stakeholder in that, as in the users, and they had quite a key part in it. However, what we're doing next, so we re-tendered over 2022, and that's going to be under provision of digital resources and services. So this one was quite interesting. It was inherited by version 1 from Nueda when we acquired them. And therefore, it was a bit ambiguous what had and hadn't been delivered. So I got an email saying that we had a large amount of digital skills for people isolated from technology effectively. So that was the whole remit, which was lovely because you could go, I mean, with that, I contacted care homes for people over 75. I contacted, particular areas of Belfast. So I did a lot of cold calling just to see who was out there. Of course, worked initially out of the broker site on Buy Social, and that is indeed where we encountered CEDAR. But I think what was so exciting is, so I've worked a lot in lots of different kinds of communities over the years, and organisations that are working to improve independence align very closely with the core values of version 1, where we're always striving. We talk about drive, we talk about excellence. These are all pushing forward experiences, pushing forward to independence. And therefore, I felt that we were culturally quite aligned, but also they had the capacity to support the work. So Helen and Ashley both touched on how important the partners, so they're talking about the people who have support workers and how much easier it is for them to engage in placements and the networks they have. I would go as far to say, as the kind of program we delivered that didn't directly result necessarily in employment, I don't think it would have been ethical to do that without a partner who were taking people further on that journey. So we were working with the Inclusion Work Service. I'm confident that whenever version 1 came in, we did 12 sessions and a 1-week placement. After that, those people had a support worker one-to-one. They could go to help them apply for college, to help them apply for our academy program. So one of the people got referred to our academy program, to help them with the next step. So version 1 weren't just floating in saying, come and work in IT, it's for everybody, and disappearing, leaving all of this pointless expectation. So I would argue that if you're an organization like version 1, you absolutely should be making sure that the people you are working with have somewhere else to go. And the only way to do that at the minute is in partnership. Unless you're so big and so well developed that you literally have a pathway from community program to employment, it's vital.
Sorry, I was just wondering on that, Jude, when your company decided to get involved in this work, okay, you're clearly you're a business, you've got to make money and so forth. Was it difficult to persuade people in your company that this was something you should do? Were there people who said, look, this isn't our business, we're about digital services and IT, why would we get involved in the community like this?
In my case, no.
Right, okay, yeah.
But when it comes to the next stage, so everybody is incredibly enthusiastic that we are now able, because we hired in capacity as an organization to do community work. We hired somebody with community experience. They were expecting me to do that. Right. The next stage, and what I am now using these programs for, is that line manager, how do we get to the next stage? There's where you're going to find blockers. It's just people just are nervous. They don't know what it looks like. They don't know what they're doing. And they're honestly, the biggest blocker, because we are customer facing, is they tell us that the customers don't want it. Now, I don't agree. I think that, it's on a case by case basis. I think that it's it's very easy to persuade customers when you have the right story, and particularly when it's their blooming clause. Don't forget, so the customers have put it in a contract that they wanted.
Yes.
All you need to do is remind them. However,
Yeah.
that infrastructure mind change, it always will take time with a large organization, and being able to do this level of program and show how much our customers appreciate it, having people like Martin in our office, building capacity, you know, the amount of people who are standing up to support this placement, and it's very, very light touch. It's like we now have an operations person who's really involved, who is going to be vital in the things that we need as an organization to become more accessible. It's almost like I'm doing that by doing it rather than, so that's how I do things, is if you build it, they will come. Everyone's different. It works here because I get a lot of liberty in Northern Ireland in particular. There's a really, really strong ESG CSR drive in Belfast, so it's easier here. The next step is then, how do we replicate this in, you know, England, India, Spain? We just got offices in Australia. Like, how can we do this globally is our next kind of thoughts, really.
But why I asked you, and I know sometimes it's a hard question, you know, because you're kind of asking what are the barriers, and you've got to be honest. I think personally, and Una would agree, you've got to be honest that there are going to be barriers. And one of the best things I find to overcome those barriers, the Equality Commission could say you can do this and you can do that, but the best thing for other employers who are a bit fearful is to see employers like you who have done it, and to listen to Martin, who's got that personal experience. Those are the biggest ways of persuading other organizations that this is something worth doing. And that's why I asked you the question. So thanks very much for that, Jude. I really appreciate it. And we'll go on to our and Martin also. So we'll go on to our next question. And there are questions coming up in the chat function, and I'm going to come to those. But I'm going to go back to another colleague from the Cedar Foundation, Michael Blair. And Michael, version 1 partnered with the Cedar Foundation through providing skills training. What benefit has this had for your participants at Cedar?
Hi, my name is Michael Blair. I'm the service manager at the Inclusion Works service in Cedar. We had about 10 people in total. Martin was one of those who went through the process, all of whom are looking for work and at various stages in their journey, and have difficulties or barriers, as you mentioned, in relation to that, in connection with their health or disability, maybe lack of experience, lack of qualifications. One or two had experience like Martin there, but all of them had a lot to offer, and this was a new experience for us. And the main benefit was, as Martin alluded to there, is the connection with an employer and having that exposure and engagement with a particularly modern big employer like version 1, and looking at those work routines again, getting a contact with that culture as well. It's a chance for them to test their skills and abilities and learn some new ones. Right from the start, they were involved by Jude. Jude has a very co-production style where they asked them their input and what would they like in terms of tweaking the content of the training, which was good for engaging and getting their involvement in that. Again, a new experience for most of our service users. It's a chance to meet new people, other service users, like Martin said, and also members of staff from version 1, etc. They worked in teams together online and supported by Cedar, and also version 1. Version 1, as Jude said, they had staff who would support them in a mentor process, as well as our own staff back at base. This was done at a time when we had a bit of a lockdown, so everything had to be done online. So it was a very new experience for them to learn collaborative working tools and do everything online themselves, and adjust to that as well. Some of them struggled with some of the coding, like the OutSystems training that they had to do, and there was a bit of peer support involved, which was very useful for some of the service users. They said they really enjoyed that they helped each other offline and then back on screen again to keep up with all the tasks and things that they had to do, and meet the deadlines that are required. They said, I remember looking through their evaluations and asked them about what they, a lot of them said that they surprised themselves, which was great to hear. And this was something that we weren't too sure about how this would all work. It's brand new to us as well. But they surprised themselves in terms of what they achieved. They said, I didn't think I'd achieve that. For example, making a quiz through OutSystems, or making a presentation to the entire group of Cedar version 1 and their families as well. They came along to version 1 offices, which we never thought was possible, but they did do it. Fantastic. Because that was a huge confidence boost for them in terms of making themselves believe in themselves as well. Like Martin was talking about restoring that belief in what he can do on his previous career that he had. Regarding the IT sector, a lot of them did find out about possible IT career paths that they might have. I know Judith's mentioning that there's responsibility she feels there in terms of making that connection, and that's work that we plan to do with Jude over the next few years to make sure that that sort of pipeline is there, that there's options. They also they find out about what jobs might work for them and what adjustments they might need, that they may not, or supports that they might need, sort of what's possible for them, which is a very vital thing to make them build their own aspirations. Most of them didn't have any aspirations to work in the IT sector before they started this, but 1 or 2 have now since, and they can see the direction, how they can get there. Those that didn't and are looking at careers elsewhere, that's part of their action plan with ourselves and our service. Their confidence in their CV and prospects have been massively boosted there. And which ourselves can take that forward, as Jude was mentioning, in terms of also connection, partnership with the likes of the jobs and benefits, access to work, condition management program, all the rest of it.
And I suppose what you're saying, in a sense, Michael, is like success breeds success, doesn't it? Confidence creates more confidence, and it's really excellent. I'm very aware of the work Cedar does. I have always kept abreast of it, and a great organisation, and you see from the work they're doing, fantastic. Thanks, Michael, very much for that. That's again another very practical sense of what the benefits are to the participants, and again, it's important for employers because when you're looking at social value and positive action, the benefit to individuals is part of the case. If you're looking at this purely in business terms, part of the case is, living in a better and more inclusive society where everybody's engaged. So really important to hear Michael's point. Thanks, Michael. And we're going to move on to another colleague of ours from Department of Communities, and this is Leo Quinn. Leo, you're coming along today to talk to us about some of the programs that Department for Community offers. So over to you, Leo. You're very welcome today.
Thanks, Paul. From our point of view, everything you've heard today, basically our programs from the Health and Work Support Branch can help you commit and carry out your social value obligations and objectives. We have a program, Access to Work, which helps people with disabilities who wish to take up employment and who are in work and experience difficulty relating to their disability. It can also help employers who wish to recruit and retain people with disabilities in employment. It can assist employers and people who are in paid employment or who have a job to start through the provision of practical support by helping meet the additional costs associated with overcoming work-related obstacles. The practical elements are, for example, Access to Work can help towards the cost of communication support for deaf people or people who have a hearing impairment or need a communicator with them, provision of special aids and equipment to suit particular work needs arising from a disability, adaptations to premises, equipment and workplaces, support if practical help is needed because of a disability, either at work or getting to and from work, support when a person with a disability incurs extra costs in travelling to and from work. And it's not exclusive. It doesn't end there. You can apply for most things on Access to Work, and an Access to Work advisor would advise you whether they can be provided or not. I have a lot of practical experience this with myself, having managed a lot of people in the civil service, for example, parts of the deaf community. I had a lady whose work was really suffering because of problems with her hearing, and we were able through Access to Work to provide a thing called a Roger pen, which amplified people's voices, and she was able to go and work on the front line with us in an office after receiving that bit of equipment. So, for example, if any organisation or any business wanted to, employ people with disabilities or bring that social value into their workplace, we are there to provide that type of support. There is another program called Workable. Now, Workable provides a flexible range of long-term support to help people with disabilities who have a lot of barriers to employment to find and to keep work. The Workable program is currently delivered by a range of local organisations who have extensive experience of meeting the vocational needs of disabled people. Workable can include support such as a work coach, job coach to assist the disabled worker and their colleague adapt to the needs of a particular job, development costs to the employer, extra training, disability awareness training. Paul, you'll know, and a lot of our colleagues know on this call, it's delivered by 3 providers contracted by the department, and Disability Action, Supported Employment Solutions, and Ulster Supported Employment Limited. And referrals to the programme are made from various sources, but in the main, they're through self-referral and disability organisations. So you'll see the wealth of support that there is out there for the businesses that think, oh, I can't do this. Oh, this is going to cost us a fortune.
Totally.
This is going to put us under in a current cost of living crisis. There
Yeah.
are elements of support out there. Another programme we have is called Condition Management Programme. And Condition Management Programme is a work-focused rehabilitation programme, which helps people understand and manage their health conditions to enable them to progress towards and move into and stay in employment. Now, this is delivered by healthcare professionals from 5 healthcare trusts. And basically, CMP can address unhelpful thinking patterns, behaviours, beliefs in relation to a person's health. It encourages and promotes self-help and coping strategies. It improves quality of life, increases physical and emotional resilience. It identifies and addresses obstacles to work. As I said, it's very unique in the fact that these are professionals, clinicians that are providing this. For example, you could go to, unfortunately, in the current climate, you could go to your GP and you could have a problem that requires physio. And this is underutilized here. You could wait for months on the NHS. If you're referred on to CMP, you could be seen in a matter of weeks. You know, instead of 12 months, it could be 6 months. People aren't aware of this. It's a self-referral process. As GPs can refer a person to CMP. It's individualized approach for a participant. It offers individual work. It aims to increase, physical, social, psychological, elements of a person. And there's an education there on on health conditions, pain management, back care. The list's endless there. We would really class CMP as a real jewel in our crown of programs. When a recent evaluation was done, there was even they evaluated, I think it was 600, nearly 700 people, and there was even one of the most surprising ones was up into the 70s and 80% of people found that it was a brilliant program. 90% found that they had increased confidence in their ability to do A, B, and C. But one of the most interesting one was there was nearly 40% of people that actually said their visits to their GP had decreased and declined because of being on CMP. So again, all these elements of support are out there. And it's a matter of just accessing them. And what we find, and my colleagues there, especially and the likes of Edith there and Nayus, we are constantly advertising what we do. We're telling and telling and telling again. Basically because a lot of them are underutilized and people don't know they're there, Paul. Up until December this year, Workable has provided long-term support to 956 people with disabilities. CMP, 1,424 people. Access to Work, 977 people. Still 3 months of the year here. So when you think about the amount of people that are in that, and when we talk about access to work, it may not necessarily be people with disabilities, but people with a long-term health condition. We have helped people that have taken epilepsy and maybe couldn't drive for 12 months. We've provided transport for that person to keep their job. So all these things are out there. And again, as I said, we are there to support social inclusion and social value and help companies and businesses meet their objectives. But I think I've talked enough now, Paul.
No, no. Well, look, everyone's kind of said that, Leo, so far. You could talk about this for a long time, and people would be interested because it's not. It's it, and I know most of it, and Edith, but a lot of people out there don't. It's really important, and again, if for employers who are developing positive action strategies and engaging in social value, DFC is a huge wealth of support for you that's there. It's underutilized. and it's something that's critical if you are considering positive action. We steer employers to DFC to avail of those programs. No, so thanks, Leo. That's very, very interesting. I'll just basically mention to you, we're going to let you go at 12:30, and I'm trying to look at the questions that are coming in and push them into some of our speakers here. And so I'm going to do that. Edith, you were going to talk about the role of the sector and in brokers and so forth, and promoting social value. One person has asked about what's the role of a broker, that was mentioned. So maybe in the next few minutes, if you could maybe cover that as well, that would be fascinating for us.
Okay, that's great, Paul. Yes, I'd seen that question actually come up, and really the role of the broker, I'll start with that. I think the role of the broker are those organisations, those community and voluntary organisations that can help a contractor with trying to meet their social value measure. You've heard of a few of those here today. You've heard of the Cedar Foundation and its work with version 1. You have also heard, as well through Recruitment Co, the different range of organisations that right across the disability sector that are brokers, organisations that can help those contractors to meet their social value. And they are all identified. I know Jenny also mentioned that in her presentation earlier on today, that when you go along to the Social Value website, you will see that there's contractors, and they will be the list of organisations that will look to tender for public procurement, but you will also see a list of brokers as well. And those are a range of organisations that meet all the criteria that is really under the social value measures. You'd heard earlier on from, I think it was from Ashley, talk about that they support a range of people who within their employment side to recruit people, and that includes people with disabilities, but also includes people from the care sector as well. So there will be organisations on that are there to help the contractor, and as I said, there are a range of disability organisations. As I said, ranging from sort of Action Mental Health, the Cedar Foundation, Appleby Trust, Disability Action, the Now Group, the Orchardville Society. There is a range there, and actually, when following on from this presentation today, there's a booklet called Making It Work, and within that there is the list of organisations that provide that sort of employment support going forward. But many of those are actually on the brokerage site as well. And I suppose that's really the question that you're asking, is how can the disability sector help? And as we've heard today from many of the organisations today, is how they've been able to help the contractor get to meet their social value. And we've heard that there's different types of social value measures as well that we heard about earlier on today. Like there's that indicator 1.5, which is about increasing the presentation of disabled people in the contract workforce. So it's looking at getting people into paid employment, it's looking at work placements, and then also that the newly added one about lawful positive action as well. So that's where those organisations, if they're looking to recruit people with disabilities, that those organisations will be there to that will obviously have the clients or the participants who is looking for employment. And as we heard from Recruitment Co, it's those organisations are well aware of the individuals that they're working with. They have been working with them for a while. They know the support needs. They know the reasonable adjustments, so they can work with the contractor to sort of help to meet their needs as well. And Helen also mentioned that was probably maybe one of the roles from NIUSE's perspective. We're the Northern Ireland Union of Supported Employment. We're an umbrella organisation, and one of the things that we had helped with Recruit Co is that we brought together all the disability organisations together, and they were able to go along and explain what the roles were within the roles they were looking for to recruit, and then that connections were made with a variety of disability organisations that have continued to work through with Recruit Co as well. So that's maybe an example of where, definitely with regards to that employment aspect, there's organisations, but also then there's about support and developing those skills. You heard from version 1 there and the links that they have made with the Cedar Foundation, and those are other examples that are out there as well. And similar with a supply chain as well. It's about working with an organisation, a social enterprise that is there promoting the work with people with disabilities, that they can also help to provide that to employer as well. So I suppose what we're really trying to say there to the contractors that are there, that, you know, in relation to, you know, when you're tendering and you're putting in your social value, that there are organisations out there that are there to help and support you. It's their job, obviously, to help people to get disabilities into employment. So it's making that good link with those organisations. And then also hearing what we heard today from Leo as well, that there's other additional support that you can get through Access to Work, through the Workable programme. And it's there sort of, you know, really supporting the contractor to do that as well, across the range of those measures. And you'll also hear then too that, you know, from Una will also mention sort of that those positive action measures. So it's about saying, you know, one of I suppose one of the things we often hear from employers, that well, exactly a similar example which would be from contractors, that, you know, we try to employ people with disabilities, but we don't seem to get any people with disabilities coming through. So working with organisations like ourselves or the other disability and individual disability organisations, they will help sort of employers to look at, you know, how do they do their recruitment? How do they advertise their jobs? Look at their job descriptions as well. There may be something in their job description that may prevent people from disabilities applying. It may not be intentional that they've included that within that, but it's looking at those things. It's maybe also looking at the essential criteria. There may be something in the essential criteria like educational qualifications that may put, you know, it's not necessarily needed for the job, but, you know, to look at how you can, you know, remove those. Maybe also too for some people with disabilities as well, a lot of criteria can be around having must have paid employment, but maybe expanding that out, not just paid employment, but volunteering as well. The skills are the same regardless if you're in a paid job or a volunteer job. So those are just some of the examples, I suppose, that, you know, they're practical. It's just really wanting to ensure that contractors, those employers, that, you know, you're not necessarily on your own, that there's organisations out there that can help you. You will find all those organisations as well on that brokerage site within the social value. The contact details are on that. NIUSE, we're on that as well. So if there's, you know, if there's a large element maybe within a large contract that you're looking to recruit a large number of people with disabilities, coming through ourselves will bring all those disability organisations together, those pan-disability organisations that look at people with physical disabilities, sensory, learning, mental health and neurodiverse, and bringing them all together to help those contractors to get that recruitment in, and we can help and support those contractors to do that as well. Is that okay, Paul, or is there any? You're on mute again, sorry.
I cannot believe I've done that twice. Do you believe that? I think
Don't worry, I'm still doing it.
Una will be delighted I did that now. It'll be picking on me for the next week. No, I was going to say we're not tight on time, but Una's next up. But I had a few other sort of questions I wanted to ask. But there's a really good question which was answered by Jeannie at the start about how you evaluate social contracts, and you know, but we can send information out on that, Jeannie. But this is just a quick question, Jeannie. In terms of evaluating social contracts, and what can employers do to show that they're meeting the criteria? Have you anything you could tell us on that?
Sure. So the first thing I say is to be really, really clear that it's really important that you answer what's on the tender documents. So there's guidance that will be included in the tender documents that will be specific to the contract. So the most important thing that a supplier or the bidder can do is be very clear and understand what's been asked of them in the question. And so there's this general guidance, like, for example, making sure that you give details. So it's the methodology, it's how you're going to deliver the social value initiatives that you've selected. So timelines, You've heard today from all the speakers about the importance of collaboration. So who are your stakeholders? How are you going to engage them? What resources are you going to use to deliver it? And then also around monitoring and evaluation. And so in the social value unit, we have our monitoring system, which all contracts are put up on. And the supplier will add in their progress on social value to that, so it's monitored. And then there's regular reports that are sent to both the supplier and the contract manager. And we encourage that social value is a regular point in contract review meetings. So it's managed like any other aspect of procurement by the contract manager.
Very good question. I won't say who asked the question because I said I wouldn't, but it was a really good question. And I was going to say, you know, I was going to ask Helen and Ashley and Jude about their experiences of social value, but to be honest, they've answered them. You know, they all talked. Jude obviously was very clear about its essential tenet of the ethos of version 1, and Helen and Ashley talked about, you know, the need for this not to be tick boxed and how it's about changing culture and attitudes. And I think they very clearly said it was a very positive experience and remains a very positive experience for Recruitment Co. So I won't ask the questions, we have the answer. And we have I see who asked. It was a great question. I have to say, when I thought you could write a thesis on it. It was very well answered as well by Jeannie. So we're going to come to our last speaker, who's my colleague Una, and Una's going to look at two separate issues. She's going to look at positive action and the action plan. So I'll hand over to you, Una.
Thanks a million, Paul. And thank you everybody for coming here today. I'm just going to slide through these slides just to where I'm going to pick up. And really, I suppose the key issue is that we want to address here is some of the issues around reasonable adjustments, because clarity around the fact that both work and work placements are covered under the Disability Discrimination Act in terms of reasonable adjustments, and the advantage of working with the disability organisations to get those reasonable adjustments right. And Edith alluded to the fact, you know, it can be the criteria, it can be, and Leo mentioned the sort of reasonable adjustments that are funded by access to work, so you can't rely on the reasonableness factor if it's fully funded by access to work. And then I'm going to look, I suppose, and I'm going to concentrate on the positive action issues, because we've actually worked with the Strategic Investment Board on looking at that clause around positive action, so that we change the statistics in Northern Ireland in terms of the employment of disabled people. And then I'm going to very briefly talk about a charter we have called Every Customer Counts. We have another one called the Mental Health Charter, but I thought I wouldn't kill you with charters today. But that is also included in the new tender information, so you will see under the social clause. And then I'm very briefly going to go through an action plan, which Brona emailed out to you this morning. And we'd like to come back to you and talk to you about how that's going, how that's working. Is that in practice helping you develop real positive action for disabled people? And that goes beyond compliance. So I'm not going to talk too much about compliance, because you all know as contractors, you have to abide by legislation, and there's information in the in various notes around general principles and awarding contracts about compliance with equality legislation, and violation of those principles can result in the individuals not being included in a contract. But one of the interesting aspects of contract compliance is that if you show that you've taken sufficient measures, so sometimes some organization may enter into a settlement with the Equality Commission, and they may review their policies, and they may, as part of that review mechanism, they might decide to develop positive action measures for disabled people. That will be taken into account as a positive way forward, and then the black mark against you, as they say, will be taken away from you in that context. And I'm not going to go into any detail on that. And in terms of reasonable adjustments, just to be thinking about. So under the Disability Discrimination Act, if a person has a disability, so the definition of a disability in Northern Ireland is slightly different to GB under the Equality Act, and slightly different if you're coming from the Republic of Ireland. It means a person has to have a physical or mental impairment which has a substantial long-term adverse effect on day-to-day activities. And you heard Martin talking about day-to-day activities. So it is about that substantial day-to-day activities is crucially important in terms of the reasonable adjustment duty. So some of the things that we would suggest is reviewing criteria for posts, including whether the post could be offered with flexible working. And that's increasingly important when you look at the statistics from ONS about the proportion of disabled people who want to work part-time. The reviewing pre-employment testing, and I'm not going to go into this. We've loads of case law, and we have a seminar on Wednesday, which I'm delivering. So you can come along if you really want to find out more about this. And also the importance of provision and alternative formats, and looking at the gaps relating to disability in people's application forms, whether that's for mental health reason, which is the single reason why our statistics on disability are continuing to grow, as mental ill health after the pandemic and after everything is continuing to grow. But looking at those adjustments to the interview process, the likes of CEDAR and Triangle, Disability Action, all those organizations can help you get that right. It can't be underestimated how important that can be in terms of removing the risk for you and the fear factors in terms of those issues, in terms of reasonable adjustments, and all that funding from the Department of Communities. And I really enjoyed Leo's statistics, because I still ask the question at every seminar, how many people in the room know about these programs? And not enough organizations do, so spread the word on it. So the new social value clause that Jeannie and I have had the pleasure of working on is the development and delivery of lawful outreach plan for positive action for the contract, which aims to increase applications for both employment and training positions on the contract from people with a disability who are seeking employment. And this can include the preparation of a positive action plan. And I want to differentiate between what is positive action and what is compliance with the reasonable adjustment duty, which you are supposed to do in any recruitment exercise in the context of disabled people. And that can include attending and developing partnerships, as Edith has mentioned, with potential brokers. So that's widening your pool of applicants to ensure that you have disabled people, because there's disabled people coming out of universities who want to work as well, and want opportunities to work, and to have that opportunity to work in different contexts. The preparation and development of engagement activities for people who have a disability, and Edith has talked about that, and other activities such as agreed by the authority or the authority's discretion. And you will find further information on lawful. It's on our website, and the link is an interactive link, so you'll actually see this. And what it's actually going to say to you is that positive action for disabled people. The Disability Discrimination Act allows employers to do things that would not be allowed under any other anti-discrimination law in Northern Ireland. So it's asymmetric. It means that disabled people have more rights. And you can, the 4 types of positive action that you can take. But before you do your positive action steps, there's a couple of steps we like to say that are really important to get the lawful part right. Okay, so ensure your equal ops policies have been implemented, including reasonable adjustments, and are up to date. And the Equality Commission will review all your policies, and they should be reviewed on a three yearly basis. It's the first question on a tribunal questionnaire, so really important in that context. Promote your flexible working practices to attract people with disabilities and other equality things. And of course, I've gone off the thing. I was looking at one of the things that we wanted to talk about was the statistics in Northern Ireland. There's it's the highest in the UK, is 40% of people, the gap between people with disabilities and people without. So 70% of people with disabilities are in employment. So if you think about it in terms of the pandemic, it initially reversed the trend in GB, but they've got back on online, but they haven't in Northern Ireland. And I suppose we really need to work at that. That increasingly number of people report is disabilities is increasing as we all age, and the magic age, if you all want to know, is 45. The more likely to acquire a disability. So sometimes it's important to tell those things. And it's also been driven by the increase in mental health conditions, as I was already explaining that. So thinking about those so you've looked at your flexible working. So the statistics on flexible working were that proportion of people more likely to be working part-time than, and it was like something like 40%. Okay. Develop a positive action plan, which you set goals and timetables. And what Jude was talking about is about, those operational managers want to see how many people do we get in? What process are we going to use? How are we going to do the recruitment? What are the stages in the recruitment? And one of the first stages you can do is use a welcoming statement. Population in Northern Ireland that have a disability is 20%. I was looking at the stats in the Republic of Ireland, and they're at 14%, and they're 21% in the rest of GB. Well, it's higher in Northern Ireland because stats haven't been collected in a while, and we haven't seen the last census. So, because of the troubles related to disabilities in the context of Northern Ireland. So, taking into account. So, those are your equality steps: welcoming, set up a policy, flexible working, look at your equal ops policies. Next step: what are positive action? Providing vocational training. So you could do the vocational training like the example version 1 has given you, which is an example of vocational training. You could do job or work trials, but as Jude very rightly said, it's important that you have realistic outcomes for people, that you don't take them on job and work trials and then leave them hanging, because there's a lot of disabled people do a lot of job and work trials and never end up in employment, and that's really disheartening, and it's going to affect their confidence in terms of going forward for the jobs. You can have a guaranteed interview for disabled people, which is what Recruitment and they have for the civil service. So if you meet the essential criteria for the posts, you're guaranteed an interview. You can also look at ring fencing jobs for disabled people. So if you have so for instance, you've a large contract and you're looking at Jeannie was mentioning, the contracts are going up to 20%. Is there potential that you could look at 5 to 10% of the contract could look at proportion of disabled people applying for those posts? And it depends on the posts, and it depends on the contract, and it depends on the job, and we're reasonable about all these things. And you obviously have to produce a contract that's fit for purpose. So it may not be for every contract, but some of the service contracts, it would particularly be easy to ring fence some of the posts going forward for those jobs. Okay, if you want to hear more about this, come to those seminar on Wednesday, because I'm not going to go through it in every detail. So training opportunities to gain experience for current and future vacancies in your organization, and you have to be very clear if people are going to be offered posts at the end of it if they perform well. If you don't, it can lead to all sorts of difficulties for both the individuals and for the organization going forward. Explain your guaranteed interview scheme and make sure that you have clear information and clear skills in line managers understanding what that means and how that works. Offer short-term job trials as an alternative to the traditional selection methods. One of the things Edith and I often talk about, and Paul and probably Leo and all the rest of us in the sector, is that if people were given an opportunity to show they could do the job rather than the traditional interview, which often makes it very difficult for people with more complex disabilities to get those jobs. And then looking at reserving those jobs for persons with disabilities, as I already explained, but not specific disabilities, because you would potentially be in a position where there would be a direct discrimination claim. But you must declare it on the job advert. It is quite clear on that. And I'll go into more detail if any of you are interested on Wednesday. And last but not least is our Charter Every Customer Counts, which I'm going to be talking about on Thursday with Northern Ireland Tourism. So it is it is about the fact that you are all bidding for very large contracts. You're working in the public sector. The development of how we develop, we know that diverse teams, which include people with the widest equality characteristics, with lived experiences, make better decision making, problem solving, creativity, innovation, which ultimately results in better products and better services. So every customer counts is about making your services accessible for disabled people, and that's now in the positive action clause as well. And what that means is, can you do an access audit? Can you improve your customer service in terms of disabled people by not treating them differently to non-disabled customers? Or can you, in the context of if there's facilities that you have, that you can ensure they're accessible for people who are deaf, hard of hearing, visual impairments, learning disabilities. And one of the big social enterprise projects around that is the Now project around the Jam card. So there's a lot of options for you to think about in terms of how can I ensure that I can get this contract and I can employ more disabled people, because 40% of us in Northern Ireland have a disabled person within our household. How many customers do you tell about? How many people run around? As Jude said, you know, the impact in the work environment of people with disabilities working in the work environment, the skills they develop. Also in the context of the managers that are working with disabled people, and those skills work equally as well with non-disabled people. So it is really crucially important. I've gone over time, Paul. I'm really sorry. And I'm going to stop now. Talk too much, but that, I suppose that gives you an idea of in terms of looking at those issues. And please complete the evaluation form. Don't leave us without the evaluation form. And thank you for your time. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay, and I'm going to let everyone go. And Edith has just sent a reminder about the evaluation form, but I really do want to say I found actually today's event one of the most interesting I've been to in a long time. And I think it was it's always you discover new things. It was really interesting, and I have to say thank you to every single one of the people who presented today, because they presented very interesting information, a very professional, very concise manner. Unusually for a webinar, there was no crossovers or repetition, which was fabulous. And I want to thank Una and I want to thank Edith for all the work they put into this. Really good. We are recording it, as I mentioned to you, because it's invaluable in terms of persuading other employers to take action. So if there's anything else we can do, please put a message in the chat function. Please come back